And YouTube says that I am live. It is Gordon Cossie coming to you, as always, live and unscripted. Don't have notes, no teleprompter here. Uh, Wearing a coat, which I don't really need, but I just had to retrieve Candy, the wonder dog. Come on up here from the backyard. She jumps all over me at the start of my videos because I have a treat for her, a TREAT, and I have to put it in a high up pocket, otherwise she can get at it. Border collies are smart, not necessarily obedient. Sit down, shake, lay down, speak. There. She goes ape over those. Danny has already started filling up the live chat, mentioning that he saw an interview with Theo Vaughn and Dana White. Dana White of UFC fame and Trump supporter. Um, And he notes that Peloton exercise bikes sponsored the show till he had RFK Jr. on, who's something of the subject of this video, although I intend to go branch out as I always do. And after that, they pulled what Danny's writing is that Pelotons were removed from Dana White's gyms when there was this protest over RFK Jr. being on this show. And then Danny further writes that most of America does not know what being healthy is. I don't know if I would say most, but certainly a large portion of the American population doesn't know, and Canadian population as well. There's not that much difference between Canada and the US. It's Super Bowl night. It's Sunday, February 9th. We're just after 9:15. And I guess we're into the second half of the Super Bowl. I obviously don't care who wins, but I'll make a prediction anyway. My prediction for the Super Bowl, I don't know, I know what the score is right now. Laura Floyd has shown up, another non-football fan. But here's my prediction for the Super Bowl. I am predicting that the Celtics will pull their goalie in the closing minutes and tie the game, but then that the Astros will come back and win in a shootout. That's my Super Bowl prediction. Ha ha ha. Uh, so before I really get rolling, you know, the usual drill. Anyone who's not that much of a Super Bowl fan, and if you're not subscribed to my channel, I would welcome you hitting the bell, smashing the like button, as I'm assuming Danny and Laura have done already. Anyone else who comes along after, I imagine some. I get it. The Super Bowl is almost a cultural event. People will not watch one single football game during the entire year, but they get invited to friends and family and they go and they watch the Super Bowl. They love the food, they love the chicken wings, the pork rinds, whatever is out. And, don't care about football the same way that most people don't care about Christianity, but they'll celebrate Christmas. They'll celebrate the incarnation of Jesus Christ into the world on December 25th. But the rest of the year, don't really care about Christmas. Well, I don't care about football. I used to. I used to. You've seen me on here before wearing a Chicago Bears shirt. Not that that's my team. That shirt was given to me. Was my team. If I had to have a team, would be the Green Bay Packers. But whatever. Football, bunch of millionaires chasing a pigskin around a field. Who cares? There are far more significant things happening in the world than who wins the Super Bowl. And one of them is coming up this week. They're having the Senate confirmation hearings for Tulsi Gabbard. I think I'm not as familiar with her as I am with RFK Jr. But I think Tulsi Gabbard is going to head up intelligence or something in that realm. It's a cabinet posting. And RFK Jr., of course, is slated to, he's been tapped by Trump to be the head of HHS, Health and Human Services, and has become a lightning rod. So it's good to have Danny and Laura here. I see there's more than just Danny and Laura. So you're always welcome to fill up the chat. Say hi. Tell me where you're from. I know that Danny's from Montreal. Laura, I'm not sure where you're from. If you don't mind sharing, I appreciate. You know, helps me get a mental image, if you will. It helps me differentiate people when I know where they're from. But likewise, if you don't want to share, that's fair. That's fair enough as well. So either way, but RFK Jr. Will he get confirmed? Will he not? We'll know later this week. But before it went, Laura, another Texan from San Antonio, home of the Alamo. I know that because my boyhood hero was none other than Davy Crockett, who famously died at the Alamo fighting against Santa Anna's army. What I remember of it. Famous movie with John Wayne. Wayne was playing Davy Crockett, if memory serves. But will RFK Jr. be confirmed or not? The Republicans hold a 3-seat they have 53 seats. The Democrats have 47. I can almost be assured that all 47 Democrats are going to vote against confirming RFK Jr. And the question is, will there be defections from the Republicans who will also vote not to? The Republicans can lose 3 votes. They can lose 3, then it's a 50-50 tie. And then what happens is the president of the Senate is the vice president. And in the case of a tie, the vice president casts the deciding vote. And of course, that's J.D. Vance, the vice president of the U.S., the man that Trump picked to run as his running mate. And he already had to cast a tie-breaking vote for this guy, Hegsteth, or however you pronounce that guy's name, defense secretary. And they got that one through. And I suspect that if RFK Jr. is confirmed, and my bias given away right up front, I am hoping that he is confirmed. If he does get confirmed, my suspicion is that it will require JD Vance breaking a tie. I think it's going to be that close. Danny is writing off topic, but I wonder how satanic the Super Bowl show was this year. I'm sure it'll be out there, and I may be commenting on it at some point. We saw what happened during the Olympics with the depiction of the Last Supper, that heinous depiction of the Last Supper. Just insane. But you want to talk about insane. The Senate during Biden's term confirmed as the assistant to the health secretary, kind of the number 2 in charge at HHS, this guy, Heather Levine, I think his name was, the guy famously, the overweight guy. Obese might be stretching it. He's overweight, who liked to wear women's naval uniforms. Someone who would have been called a cross-dresser in previous generations. He would have been simply called a cross-dresser or a transvestite. Anyway, he was confirmed. And if the Senate can confirm him, well, then RFK should be a walk in the park. But it's not going to be a walk in the park. I think that if RFK Jr. is confirmed, that it is going to require J.D. Vance, vice president, to break a tie. Even if the Senate does not confirm RFK Jr., it is my understanding, I haven't read up too much on this. I mean, I hope he just gets confirmed and everything, whether it's a tie-breaking vote or whether it's 51-49, whatever happens, I hope he's confirmed. But if for whatever reason, 4 or more Republicans vote against confirming him, then it is my understanding that Trump can then fire the current secretary of HHS, their top dog, fire that individual, and then unilaterally on his own backfill the position with a quote unquote temporary, impose a director on them temporarily. And that, and there's a term for this, and I can't remember the term. And I have Danny writing, he was the poster child for health. No, ha 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 ha. Yeah, this Heather Levine, the guy, and I like that you capitalized HE. The man has 2 children. He fathered 2 children. Heather Levine fathered 2 children. Only men can father children. Not going down that rabbit hole. I wish I was living in the United States again, because I'm living in that what crazy Canada, male and female. End of story. Uh, anyway, Trump rather, RFK Jr. has been coming under a lot of fire for his stance on quote unquote vaccines. I got to be very careful here because of YouTube terms of service. I am not a medical doctor. I don't have any accreditation in any area of medical science. So I'm just going to be commenting and doing my best to represent views held by others. But it's my understanding that at some point in RFK Jr.'s career, and as an advocate for children's health, that he said something to the effect that there is no such thing as a safe and effective you know what. And he has since, in the Senate hearings, from what I understand, somewhat walked that back. But to be entirely honest, I don't have any particular issue with that statement, because we've entered into a world where everything has to be one size fits all. Oh my goodness, I know I'm up to 8 people watching. At least that's what YouTube says. And I'm amazed there are that many people who aren't into watching the Super Bowl. Bravo. Who cares? Who cares who wins the Super Bowl? Like, I'm going to give my prediction again, just because I know there are new people watching. My prediction for the Super Bowl is that the Celtics we're going to get into the dying, waning moments of the game, and the Celtics will pull their goalie and score to tie it up, but then that they're going to lose to the Astros in a shootout. Ha ha ha. Uh, Danny is asking, should we become the 51st state? I do have that. I am going to touch on that in the, I've got that down in the description. Should Canada become the 51st state? Is Trump genuinely going to try and make Canada the 51st state? He's made no bones about the fact that he wants us to be the 51st state. He's talked about how great it would be if that, he refers to it as the artificial line, the 49th parallel. If we just erase that artificial, he's referring to it as an artificial line. And the what a world that would be. There was something called, and I forget when it first came out, but in the United States they called it manifest destiny. I think it was sometime in the 1800s, that this concept that at some point the United States of America would control all of the North American continent, and this was called manifest destiny, or manifest destiny. Kind of pronouncing destiny wrong. Um, But going back to RFK and the fact that is it possible to say that of any pharmaceutical product that it is 100% universally safe and effective? And I have to question that. I don't know. I do not have a medical degree, but my understanding is that certain individuals, certain populations have sometimes it's not always safe and what's safe and effective for one person may not be safe and effective for another. People can have different genetic makeups, different medical conditions. When you go to the doctor and they prescribe, they quite often look for what are called counterindications. Can I give you this medication in tandem with it? You're already taking medications A, B, C. If I add on D, does it impact those three medications you're taking already? Does it diminish their efficacy? Are there any dangerous side effects? Things like that. So, a one size fits all, this is universally safe and effective. I honestly don't know. And another thing that he kind of got raked over the coals for, and I always, these things are always taken out of context, was the fact that there is research that has come out that has indicated that different racial communities have different levels of immunity, and that RFK was speculating on the potential for having different schedules for Black Americans as opposed to white Americans. If science was to bear out that Black Americans, say, could wait on certain interventions, maybe that would make sense. And we get into this whole area of science becoming a religion, scientism. And I have difficulty when the science being presented is originating from an industry that is ultimately profit driven. In the thumbnail to this video, I have juxtaposed, I have, chubby little Bill Gates against ripped RFK Jr. RFK Jr. is 71 years of age. He's actually a little bit older, a couple years older than Pudgy Bill. And RFK Jr., man, he's in better shape than I am. Not he's got, and I've got I don't know how many years he had. He's over 10 years older than me. He's 71. I'm 58. 13-year difference, and that man is ripped. And Bill Gates, on the one hand, he's a major investor in pharmaceutical companies. He's got the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Maybe it's now just the Gates Foundation or the Bill Gates Foundation that is heavily into vaccine initiatives. And he has a vested interest through his shareholdings in seeing the vaccine companies ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. It helps his bottom line. Maybe he can overtake Musk and become the richest man in the world. I don't even know who the richest man in the world is anymore. But for years, we'd have science. We had industries using science to promote their products. We had the oil and gas industry that would finance research and scientific discovery into the environmental impact of oil exploration. And when their research, when their science said that that they were environmentally friendly, everyone said, well, you can't trust that. It comes from the oil and gas industry. When the tobacco industry came out and said, we have scientific research proving that our cigarettes are not a danger to health, most reasonable people said, well, you can't trust that. It's being financed by the oil and gas industry. Well, how, when you have scientific research being conducted by companies that have a vested interest in having their product approved and brought into market, and actually, in the case of the COVID pokes, being pretty much forced. When you tell someone you can't work without it, you can't travel without it, you can't be a functioning member of society without it, that's force. And based on, is it rigorous science? That's the only question I'm asking. Have there been large population studies? It's my understanding that in the Pfizer trials, that what they did is after a month or two, that they destroyed the placebo group because they turned around and they offered the intervention to everyone who was in the placebo group. These are supposed to be double blind. This is the gold standard of scientific research. The trials are supposed to be double blind, meaning that the people receiving the drugs and placebos, as well as the company. No one knows whether they're receiving placebo or the actual medication, the pharmaceutical product, and the investigators don't know what they're receiving. But what they did a couple months into the trial, I don't know exactly how long, but it wasn't long. I mean, the whole trial that they had, the single one trial that they had was only a few months long to begin with. It was less than a year. I think it was at most 8 or 9 months. They unblinded it, and so that they could see who were the people who hadn't gotten the poke. And then they said, "Here, and everyone, of course, has been scared to death by, you know, we don't know what to do about this virus. If you get it and you go into the hospital, we're going to tell you to go home and don't call us unless you're having trouble breathing." Oh my God. People scared to death over this thing. So they did is now when you have people willingly participating in a medical trial, that indicates that they have a high level of trust. They're trusting enough to sign up for a medical trial. And so when they unblinded it, it had to be 90% plus of the participants who had gotten the placebo said, "Yeah, give me the pharmaceutical product. I don't You gave me saline before, I want the real thing." And so now you've destroyed the placebo group, so you've destroyed the ability to measure how the pharmaceutical product, I'm using that word on purpose, how the pharmaceutical product works as compared to placebo. And yet they call it rigorous science. And we're in a society now where not everyone, but a lot of people, all they want to hear, they just want to hear an authoritative voice tell them that according to quote unquote the science, this is what we know. This is the truth. And then full stop, and no need for further investigation. When the Lancet, the world's preeminent medical journal, published a study that showed ivermectin was both ineffective and dangerous. That ended the conversation for a lot of people, and they missed the fact that that study was based on fraudulent data and that the Lancet had to retract the paper because the company that had published or put the paper out and had it published by the Lancet, peer-reviewed science, supposedly. And there's another issue. Peer review, people think peer review means true. And it does not necessarily have to mean true. Trials have limitations. Trials they need to be confirmed. You can't just do one study and that ends the conversation. Science doesn't advance when you do that. Let me read what's being written. Okay. Hank was saying hello to the La gang. Everyone's saying hi. Danny's predicting in the Super Bowl that someone will win, someone will lose. Danny wants to see Canada get the First and Second Amendment, First Amendment being the right to freedom of speech, assembly, press, and the Second Amendment being the right to bear arms. Hank Holiday is asking if I had heard of Billy G on The View say a new Billy G. I'm thinking, you say Billy G, first name that comes to my mind is Billy Graham, but I know you're talking about Gates. On The View, say a new pan, what, will happen in the next 4 years. I saw a bit of the clip. I honestly, and this is a failing of mine, I should listen to what he has to say, regardless of the fact that he, I, he's like Tucker Carlson with me. Tucker Carlson is someone I just don't like the manner in which he puts things across with this smug, I know it all attitude. And Billy Gates has the same thing. And I just have trouble listening to him. I saw the clip of him on The View expressing his opinions. I think they were talking at the time about the defunding of the World Health Organization. And Billy was painting a doom and gloom scenario and specifically related to the shots and talking. I think that's where he said, it's inviting another big demic on the world, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah. Um, Danny's talking about the fact that in terms of our, ability to handle certain interventions and our health overall, that you've got to take into account things like weight and height. There's genetic makeup, there's weight, there's height. When they type in, when they're trying to determine a dose for someone, they want to know your age, your weight, your height. They need to know a lot of factors, but everyone wants a universal one size fits all opinion. And yet life ain't always that simple. Sometimes there is nuance involved. Um, yeah, and Danny's writing to Hank that, oh, you mean they're going to quote unquote release another one? And which is now you can say that did COVID, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, did it come from a virus? The CIA has said that's the likely source of SARS-CoV-2, that it came from a lab, and probably that lab in Wuhan, China, right next door to the wet market where the bogus claim that it came from a bat came from. And I say bogus claim because they have gone into bat populations all over China and all over the world looking for the source. And they've yet to find an example of SARS-CoV-2 in a bat population anywhere. And so then they shifted, they pivoted and said, well, maybe it came from a raccoon dog. A bat infected a raccoon dog, and then SARS-CoV-2 developed in the raccoon dog, and then the raccoon dog, okay, show me an example of it in a raccoon dog population. Then they still haven't done that. But distraction, don't look over here, look over here, don't look over there. Sleight of hand. Hank Holiday, I don't know what that emoji is. Looks like Groucho Marx. Danny's writing that as of February 2025, Elon Musk is the world's richest person with an estimated net worth of 402 billion. He's incredibly rich. How smart he is, I don't know. He's certainly not that linguistically smart. He's not a great communicator in terms of it orally. But that doesn't mean not smart. I've known some incredibly intelligent individuals who are not the best talkers. There's there's oral intelligence, the ability to convey ideas, but people like that can be really dumb at math. And then you have people who are amazing at math, incredibly gifted when it comes to solving difficult equations and things like that, and trigonometry and all and functions and relations and high string theory and things like that. You get into these theoretical models and things, and they're brilliant, but they can't convey an idea. So there are different domains for intelligence. I do question the degree to which Elon Musk is considered a genius. He seems to be. We're told he's a genius, but I don't know. I have my questions. I know that Tesla, he didn't invent the electric car. He didn't create Tesla. He took it over kind of the way he took over Twitter. And he comes from an incredibly wealthy family. There's something interesting I heard that there is you can check into this. It is wild. Um, there, and I forget the man's name, but after World War II, there was a German Nazi high-ranking scientist who was involved in their rocket program, the V1, V2. He was like their top guy. And the U.S., he was able to come over into the United States, and he worked on the U.S. rocket and space program. And then he also wrote a book. And in this book, Earthlings, humans, were able to send rockets and land on the planet Mars. Sound familiar? Elon is talking about going to Mars. And who did they encounter there? The leader of the Martians was a guy called the Elon, same spelling, the Elon. Just seems rather serendipitous, don't you think? Um, and Danny's saying it was always about control. Everything that we went through. I'm convinced, my own personal opinion, I've said it here before, got to, tap dance a little bit, but I think all the mandates, all the restrictions, all the lockdowns, my opinion is that that was all designed to build buy-in so that people would be begging to roll up their sleeves and would turn a blind eye to the obvious overreach and the obvious trampling of our basic human rights, where a person can say, no, I'm invoking my right to bodily autonomy. I do not want that in my body. Something previously that's included in the Nuremberg Code after the Nazis. We didn't want to see a repeat of what happened in places like Dachau and Auschwitz with that guy, Dr. Mengele, and what he did to human beings, forcing medical interventions on them that they did not want. This notion of informed consent. You have to give me all the information. And then once I have all the information, then I am allowed to make a decision and I am allowed to say no. And that is absent of force or coercion. And telling someone that you have to take this medical intervention or you're going to lose your job is absolutely 100% coercion on steroids. And it should never have been allowed. But because the propaganda had done such a wonderful job at scaring people into submission, that they applauded when individuals like me were restricted from working in my former profession or from being allowed to get on a plane or even to sit down in a simple coffee shop to have a coffee. They were thrilled that I wasn't able to do it or anyone else. Michelle Stewart is here and she is saying that she trusts Kennedy. Uh, he's my I want him to, my own personal view from up here in Canada is that I want him to be confirmed. Why does a Canadian care? Because whatever the US does, Canada tends to follow lockstep in terms of health. Whatever the FDA approves, 6 months later, Canada rubber stamps. That's typically the way it goes. And look at I always like to bring up there's a drug brought to the market by Pfizer. It was called Bextra, Bextra. That's Bravo, Echo, X ray, Tango, Romeo, Alpha. Bextra. Pharmaceutical drug and anti inflammatory approved as a safe and effective medication by the FDA. Went through the trial process, approved, put on the market in the year 2000, not ancient history, in the 21st century, this century. They put it on the market, and it was on the market for 5 full years. And then it was withdrawn from the market. How could a safe and effective medication like Bextra be withdrawn from the market? Because they found it was causing all manner of deaths and heart damage, heart attacks, things of that nature, cardiovascular issues. Sound familiar? But it took 5 years because science is a slow process. And this Bextra was not a drug that was rushed onto the market without 3 separate long duration trials taking place. Normally in the pharmaceutical industry, you have phase one called a safety trial. And that's the primary focus of phase one. How is our drug, how is our pharmaceutical product tolerated? They do look at other things, but the primary focus is on safety. After that first one, phase one trial is completed, the company then pores over the results. And after poring over the results, if there are no issues and it's tolerated and it appears to be safe, Then the company goes and they design a phase two trial. And they take the design for that phase two trial, give it to the FDA, and then the FDA reviews it, and then they can either approve it, right? Good to go. This is great. Or they can mandate that there be changes. You need more people. You need whatever. You need to expand it. You need more locations. Whatever the case. So, but once the FDA approves that, then the phase two goes on, and that's called an efficacy trial. What you're trying to determine in phase two is, does the pharmaceutical product actually work and do what it was designed to do? You still keep an eye on safety, obviously, because now you're building time. But phase two is primarily about efficacy. Does it work? And they might even include different arms with different dosages. Maybe one group will get 5 milligrams, another 10, another 15. And at this point, they're trying to determine what is the sweet spot. Is 5 milligrams enough? Do we need to have 10? Should it be 15? So they might have three arms. And then that study is done. And when it is completed, and you can go to clinicaltrials.gov. This is where all this information is contained. Every clinical trial going on, pretty much, I'm assuming it's all of them. It's a government repository for all medical trials. It'll have, and when you go to clinicaltrials.gov, it'll say estimated start date, estimated completion date, the date at which all the data will have been reviewed. It's a long process, at least months long and usually years. These trials normally take years and years. The entire, from concept to approval, if something gets through all the hoops, is 10 plus years. And so phase two ends, and then again, they pore over the results. If they find their drug or their pharmaceutical product to be efficacious, that it works, then based on those results, then you go into a large phase three trial, which is designed to get your drug approved or your pharmaceutical product approved. And it's a much larger study, many more people involved, many more so-called patient years. And then that gets completed, the results are poured over, you submit it to the FDA, and then after the FDA reviews it, then it's done. But what we had in the case of COVID is the studies weren't even completed, and they gave it an emergency use authorization. So people said that it's been proven to be safe and effective. Well, are the trials finished? Well, no, they're still ongoing. What? So the trial isn't even over and they've already declared it safe and effective? How can you do that if the trial isn't even done yet? And they destroyed the bloody placebo group in the case of Pfizer. I don't know if Moderna did as well, or AstraZeneca, or the others, but I do know that Pfizer's placebo group was destroyed. So how do you measure it? If you don't have a placebo group to measure against, how do you know? But my unscientific mind. I always like to bring up the fact that while I do not have any background in medical science or the sciences in general, I do not consider myself to be scientifically illiterate because I did take science courses at the university level undergraduate. Took psychology, Psych 101, took some environmental science project. I took a course in environmental science, studying the ecosystem of a sand dune. That's what I remember of it. But you're introduced to the scientific method a little more in depth than you are in high school. You learn about this concept of a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. Double-blind meaning neither the people involved in the trial as participants nor the investigators know whether they're taking the drug or a placebo. Both are blind, double blind, placebo controlled trial. There's a group called the Safety Monitoring Board, Data Safety Monitoring Board, and they know who, but the investigators are to have zero contact with anyone on the Data Safety Monitoring Board because it could taint the trial. And yet, what did we have in the case of Pfizer? They unblinded their trial and offered the intervention to everyone in the placebo group, thus eliminating the potential to compare how does the intervention work against placebo. It was mind-blowingly heinous. Just going to read up on what's being said. So I got to Michelle saying that she trusts Kennedy. I certainly trust Kennedy more than I trust the corporate sector. Kennedy, on top of being a major advocate for children's health, was also an environmental lawyer. He also helped clean up the Hudson River. This guy has some accomplishments behind his name. I feel sorry for his voice. He has some condition that affects, I think it's a neurological condition that affects the vocal cords and causes them to spasm, which makes his voice sound really raspy. And it's unfortunate. And Kennedy himself, I've read where he has said that he can't listen to himself talk when he sees a recording of himself. Apparently, he had a very strong speaking voice, was very, he's a Kennedy. Everyone knows John F. Kennedy. Ich bin ein Berliner. Ask not what you can do for your country. No, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Um, John F. Kennedy was an amazing speaker. Bobby Kennedy had an amazing oratory, and RFK Jr. being Bobby Kennedy's son, it's got to be genetic. Apparently, he could, talk to a room, an auditorium of 500 people without a microphone. Very powerful speaking voice. And then he developed this neurological condition which causes vocal cords to spasm, and it's rather unfortunate. But don't listen to how it's being said. Simply listen to what the man is saying and weigh that out. And it annoys me so much. There's so much gaslighting going on, so many ad hominem attacks, so much straw manning of guys like RFK Jr. And you have an incredibly dumbed down population that just gets their marching orders from television, and they say, "Oh, that guy's a kook." Have you listened to what he said? No, I don't have to. He's a kook. And CNN told me. I bet you think ivermectin's horse paste too. Yeah, it is. I heard that on CNN. They said it was horse paste. So there's no human use for it. No, it's horse paste. There are too many of these people out there, and they need to be confronted. But they'll turn around, they'll gaslight you, and they'll say, "Oh, you're one of those guys who sits on his toilet with his cell phone doing research, eh?" I'm smart. I just listen to CNN. God help us all. Danny is writing that the clinical trials that, that the emergency use, interim use, that was the clinical trial. Save for those of us with testicular fortitude, those of us with cojones. And then Danny's putting it down, convid, that's how he always calls it, 19 bracket 84, 1984. Man, made by, yes, the Surgeon General of the state of Florida, I forget the gentleman's name, but you can read into that yourselves. Check out what the Surgeon General of the state of Florida has said with respect to these pharmaceutical interventions. I'll try to avoid getting into trouble. And Danny's given me the name of the individual who was with NASA when NASA started, and his name was von Braun. And on top of being a Nazi and then coming over to the United States and helping them work on the space race and rocket technology. On top of that, he wrote a book, unpublished, but you can get a copy of it. I guess it was Vanity published. I guess he had it published himself. And about humans going to Mars and meeting, quote unquote, the Elon. Musk scares me. I look upon Musk as being the fifth column, as being the enemy within. He's not an American citizen. Well, he probably is now, but he's South African, Canadian, American. It's kind of a citizen of the world. And he's going to be the savior. Get into your Bible. Anyway, he's pretty much my number one candidate for a certain biblical figure who is the anti something. And Danny's writing, when the side effects of a drug includes the possibility of death, you might want to rethink taking it. Yeah, well, whatever. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not allowed to give medical advice, so I won't even go there. But speaking personally, if I was 85, 90 years of age and trying to squeeze a few more months of diaper changes out and a couple more trips in my wheelchair, and they said take this thing, I might go, yeah, what the hell? I'm not going to live forever. Uh, and Danny and I and numerous others, well, millions of Canadians, we are now the placebo group, not even placebo. Placebo is, for those unaware, and most know, but some don't. I've told the joke. I said I've told people I'm taking this amazing drug. It's called a placebo. It's been amazing. What's it called? Placebo? What? Who makes it? I'm like, it's a joke. Placebo is typically it's a sugar pill, or in the case of a vaccine trial, it's saline salt solution. So you don't know whether you're taking, and quite often trials may have three groups. One group who gets nothing, one group gets placebo, one group gets the intervention, the pharmaceutical. So you have three arms. I think that is called a cluster trial. Danny is writing that this von Braun, the guy who wrote about quote unquote the Elon, this Nazi rocket scientist, that he was a devout atheist. Yet on his tomb it has his name, date of birth, date of death, but also the words from the 19th Psalm, the first verse. Let's take a look. What does it say in the 19th Psalm? I always have my Bible at hand, or almost always. Sometimes I. Psalms, if you ever want to find Psalms, Proverbs, just go right to the middle and then scroll back a little to the left, and you'll come to the Psalms. This Bible doesn't work because this Bible includes the Apocrypha books that are included in the Latin Vulgate, but were when the Protestant Bible was put together, were left out. Books like Tobit, or sometimes called Tobias, Solomon's Book of Wisdom. 19:1 says, the heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. Wow. From a guy who studied rockets. I'll take you at your word that that's on his gravestone. So, will RFK Jr. be promoted? Will he get the job? Will he be director of human and health services? I think that's what it is. Hey, if they could approve Heather Levine, that overweight guy who liked to wear dresses and pretended to be a woman, if they can do that, if they could do it for him, they better do it for RFK Jr. I pray that RFK Jr. takes on that role. And I think you're going to see pharmaceutical companies worried. And there has absolutely 100% been an explosion in diabetes, and just as one, obesity leads to all manner of complications, one of which, of course, is diabetes. And people who get diabetes are then very prone to cardiovascular disease and kidney failure. Ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. And there are so many pharmaceutical products out there right now, a lot of the antidepressants and such, and psychotropic drugs. A lot of times they come with a side effect of weight gain. And then with weight gain comes diabetes. So you start taking a medication for psychiatric condition, and that leads you to become overweight and have diabetes. And then after you get diabetes, well, then they give you more drugs for the diabetes. And then diabetes leads to cardiovascular and circulatory problems. Then they give you SGLT inhibitors like Lexitor, Liptor, and what's the other one? There's Lipitor, and there's another one, the two main drugs. And then kidney failure. And then they can start hooking you up to dialysis and taking other drugs for your failing kidneys. And it's a great business model. It's a great business model. What'll happen when a guy comes in, if a guy comes in like Kennedy, who wants to make America healthy again and is willing to take on big food, big agra, that want to, you got a drug called atrazine, not a drug, it's a herbicide, pesticide called atrazine. And what atrazine does is they spray it. It's a spray. And it's banned in Europe. And there have been studies that have been done. I think it was Stanford University did a study exposing African frogs to atrazine at levels less than what the EPA allows to get, what allows these companies to use it as a herbicide for. So at low levels, and what it did to the African frogs is that it sterilized a large number of the male frogs, and some of the male frogs actually flipped gender. And they went from being male frogs to female frogs that produce viable eggs. It's a Stanford study. You can read about it online, easy to find. Now, the question is, okay, that's what it does to frogs. What does it do to human beings? Well, they haven't done the studies. And if you're a maker of atrazine, that would make sense. If your profit is, selling this this herbicide pesticide, if that's how your bread and butter, where your bread and butter is, and you're selling it and you're making money, millions probably, maybe tens, maybe hundreds of millions. I don't know how much money they make. And then if you do a study that finds out that it has negative impacts on human physiology, what impact does it have on the reproductive systems of humans, on mammalian species? Could be bad news. So better not to do the studies at all. And then you can just pretend and you can say, well, there's no evidence showing that atrazine has a negative impact on the human population. And you're not lying because there's no evidence of it because you've never looked for any. You've never done a study. You've never investigated the question of we know what it does to frogs. What does it do to humans? We don't know. We're not going to look at that. That's too dangerous. That could hurt our bottom line. And it's amazing to me how so many on the so-called progressive left are all in on supporting these major profit-driven corporations at potentially the expense of human health. And you look at the population, and George Carlin did a beautiful routine on this, talking about, the two favorite activities of the American right now is going around the mall and buying stuff. Go buying. That's consuming. That's what Americans love to do, and our favorite place to do it is the mall, because the mall lets us fulfill our two greatest desires: buying stuff and eating. We can walk around the mall stuffing our, with cheese curds. And he gives one of his lists of all the crappy food that Americans eat. Says, and if you deep fry it, if you deep fry rats' assholes, that's what he says, Americans will buy it. And have you seen people in the mall? They're massive guts, huge thighs, and big asses. It's very profane, but he's bang on the money. And in terms of this Von Braun, Danny is saying that you can just Google images, his gravesite, very easy to find. And Sheriff of YouTube is another Montrealer, and he's saying he's MAGA Montreal. I didn't know you were from Montreal, Sheriff. I just know you're, when you show up, I expect smart ass remarks, which it's all good. What else is, I'm going to wrap up soon though. It's Sunday night. I am working tomorrow early. Um, oui, oui. Il faut écrire Y, O-U-A-I-S, Y. And it's 514 right downtown Montreal. 450 is the Bandelier. 514 is Centreville, downtown. And Danny's saying he's also Maple MAGA, Mick GA, make Canada great again. Um, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I've got to, talk more about the Canadian political landscape and what's happening, but everyone probably has already heard about what happened down in the Caribbean Sea off the coast of the Cayman Islands, a tax-free haven. The uber wealthy live on the Cayman Islands. You talk about the billionaires of the world. That's their little playground. Well, an earthquake very early this morning, very early Sunday morning, an earthquake magnitude, or very late last night, I forget which, doesn't matter, within the last 24 or so hours, there was a magnitude 7.6 earthquake off the coast of the Cayman Islands. There were warnings about the potential for a tsunami for Cuba and for Puerto Rico. But as I understand it, those warnings have sent, they didn't, no tsunami resulted, and those warnings have been lifted. There's no more warning of a tsunami. But so you have and 7.6, that's massive. That's a big earthquake. Initially, it was measured at 8.0, but then the USGA, US Geological Agency, or whatever they're called, they lowered it from 8.0 to 7.6. And I think it happened again off the coast of the Cayman Islands in the Caribbean Sea, underneath the underneath the seabed, underneath the ocean floor, down about 10 kilometers, I think, a depth of in and around 10 kilometers. So we've got that um, event. And then we have what's going on in the Aegean Sea, in the Greek islands, particularly around one island called Santorini, where there have been literally hundreds and hundreds of tremors and earthquakes. And I think the highest they've gotten up to is 5 point whatever. So not as significant as the one down in the Caribbean. A five you will feel, but a 7, if it happened on land, or happened close to land, that would cause major damage. I think it was in Oakland. Well, I know there was an earthquake. The last big one in California was in Oakland, San Francisco, and what they call the Bay Area. And I think it was 1989. I got to check into this because I keep going back to it. Um, but during a World Series game between Oakland and San Francisco, they called it the Bay Area Series. The stadium started shaking, and there was an overland expressway that collapsed, and cars that were underneath it, people were killed, they were crushed. It was bad. Danny's giving me a new area code. I'm not even familiar with it. 438. I'm assuming that's an area code. For Montreal, all I was aware of was the 514 for downtown, the 450, the 450 for the Bandelier, the arrondissement, the suburbs. And then I know out in Quebec City, it's 418. Other parts are 819. But I didn't know there was a new one, but they've added area codes here too in Ontario. I can't keep up with all of them. And the sheriff is saying, on the bright side, we might get a new Paradise Island in the next 20 years. Yeah, who knows? It's at Montserrat. We might get a volcanic island will spring up in 20 years after the ash all settles and silt forms on top and palm trees start to grow. We might have a new island paradise to go and visit. And the date of the earthquake in California, thank you, October 6th, or October 17th, and it was a 6.9. Yeah. So this one's 7.6, even more. And I said this last time, the way the Richter scale works is each point it's 10 times greater. So when you have a magnitude 5 is 10 times stronger than the magnitude 4, and a magnitude 6 10 times stronger than the magnitude 5. So once you get up in and around 7, you're into major. If it gets up to 8, oh my gosh. And will that come? It could. My crystal ball is broken. But anything else that I. And we have Danny saying that the most recent large earthquake in California was a magnitude 7.1 Ridgecrest earthquake 2019. Eastern California near the town of Ridgecrest. Eastern California. So I would imagine it was in a largely unpopulated area. Eastern, probably on the. You have the Cascade Mountains. I don't know if the Cascade Mountains go all the way down into the southern part of California or not, how far down they go. I'll have to look that one up. But I imagine, because I don't even wasn't even aware of it, is that it happened in a largely unpopulated area. If something happens out in, what do they call it, Death Valley in the desert, you know, 3 cactuses fell over, or 3 cacti. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Not too much significant happening right now. I don't think I'm going to get a lot of engagement on this one just because it's Super Bowl night. And see if my. Actually, I did at work the other day. Someone, hey, who you picking? Oh, I don't know. I'll say Philadelphia. And they went, really? Why do you think Philadelphia? I said, I have no reason. I'm just pulling that out. I said, I know Kansas City has won the last couple, so I figure the fix is in. It's going to be Philadelphia. We'll see if I'm right. My joking. I like my other prediction better, though, that the Celtics will pull their goalie late in the game to force overtime. They'll score, force overtime, and then the Astros will win in the shootout. I like that. Anyway, God bless. Didn't get much under the Bible tonight, but that's okay. I will end my video the way I end them all, reading from the end of chapter 6 of Numbers, where Aaron speaks this blessing over God's covenant chosen people. And the blessing is this: the Lord bless and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. And as I always say, the offer is there. God will give you peace. I wanted to let you know, Danny, I typed it early that during my last video, Danny recommended that I take a look into Cat Williams. And I did. And actually, I didn't even have to look into him. It started showing up in my feed. Cat Williams is a comedian who a few months ago was doing a show in Arizona, and he got heckled by a Mexican who said, you're this is Mexico. And Cat Williams lost it on him a bit and just totally destroyed him and had the audience shouting USA, USA, and singing the Star Spangled Banner, oh say can you see. And yeah, Arizona at one time used to be part of Mexico. You had I think it's called the Spanish-Mexican War or the American-Mexican War, but you had a war between Spanish-Mexican forces. I think they were still somewhat a colony of Spain at that time, and the Americans. And that's why I think it's called New Mexico. Texas used to be its own republic. It used to be its own country, but at one time it too was part of Mexico. And boundaries change. Imagine that. Someone needs to tell that to the people in the Middle East, that boundaries change, that just because the Arabian Empire once had the area around Judea, just because they conquered it, well, you lost it. You lost it, and it's not yours anymore. Boundaries change, and deal with it. Uh, Otherwise, everyone's going to. Are we all supposed to go back to our ancestral homelands? What are you going to do? Chop me up into bits and send part of me to England, part of me to Scotland, part to Wales, and part to Ireland, and part to France? Yeah. Anyway, it's crazy. Um, Hank, because I know you're LDS, I want to mention that. Keep an eye out. I'm going to be doing a video, and it's going to be a little clickbaity. But I'm going to ask the question: are LDS brackets Mormons saved? And give my opinion on the matter. And I think you may just enjoy it. And so that'll be coming up this coming week, maybe tomorrow. We'll see what happens in the news cycle because something is always happening. And I found when I did a couple videos detailing my experience with the LDS Church, Latter day Saints, Church of Jesus Christ, the Latter day Saints, the Mormons, uh, they got a lot of engagement. And it's something I do have opinions on, so I'll put it out there. Uh, Hank is saying, Amen, brother. I like this. He says, some are and some are not. I am, just because someone identifies. Uh, it's a condition of the heart. And that's something I'm going to address because spoiler alert, what bothers me so much is that we seek out our differences so much more than we seek out that which we have in common. And I like to center on our commonalities rather than our differences. I think the enemy wants us focusing on our differences. And I've been reflecting on it because we've got I'm bumping into a fair number of Mormons lately, and you know what? Goodness, you talk about nice, warm, amazing people, overwhelmingly. So I'm sure there's the odd jerk who's a Mormon, but I've yet to meet one. So anyway, God bless. So that'll be coming up this week sometime, as well as some more commentary on the Canadian political front and everything else going on in the world. Certainly, Trump is never out of the news cycle. He's always doing something. I've got to talk about how Canada, how the liberals are Trump is doing the liberals a huge favor about by talking about making Canada the 51st state and how that's helping lift liberal fortunes in this country, unfortunately, but it's helping them. And Canadians, I don't think we really have to worry about becoming the 51st state. Yes, Trump is saying it would be nice. That's a conditional term. He's not saying it will be nice. He's not saying we are going to do it. He's saying it would be nice. It would be nice if there was no border there, if we were all one country. Look how big we would be. Look at the resources we'd have. Look at the amazing population size we'd have, that it would be amazing. But he's saying would be. He's not saying he's going to roll the army in and take us over. So it's a bit of a red herring to my mind. And so I'll leave you there. And again, God bless. I've already said the blessing. So we'll talk to you probably tomorrow night. Night all.